Welcome, everybody, to the Career Jungle podcast, where we talk about work, education, and everything in between. And today is our second video episode. What's up, Ben?
Second
Doing good?
episode, rock on.
Yeah, which is very exciting. And today we're going to talk about no code, low code. And this is just us today talking about it because I am the resident expert.
We have
And
you as a guest and as a host today.
exactly. And we'll cover a bunch of topics and a bit more about why it matters to you. And that's really what I want to focus on, is that it's not just the concept, but how it matters to people's careers. And so why don't we, Ben, why don't we start off with, I'll explain a little bit about what no code is and what the movement is, and then we'll discuss some topics about the platforms and yeah, take it from there.
But before you start, could you please explain to me what no code is?
Of course, that's why we're here. So no code is essentially this movement that basically states that you don't need to know how to code to build software or to automate things in your life. So it's a very loose term for anything starting from Wix, where you can build like a basic website or Squarespace. And it goes on to a little bit more advanced things like doing loops without any code. And loops is like a coding term, but you do it visually. And so it's essentially doing what the code would do if it was written, but doing it in a visual way. So you don't actually need to know what's going on behind the hood. And then essentially what happened since 2019 is no code became this term that people use. So we had Squarespace and Wix, and we had all these platforms. And then suddenly everybody was like, hey, like I can build this SaaS or software as a service or this internet business without writing any code, piecing together like a form tool and like Wix and different platforms. And I could actually start a business. It essentially became like this no code movement where people like really identify with it. And they're like, hey, I can do all these cool things without any code by piecing together and bunching together all these different tools. And you can actually create businesses, you can automate processes. Yeah, essentially do most things that code does without writing any code. And we'll go into a lot more of the advantages and disadvantages. So it's not like a silver bullet, but that's essentially the idea around no code.
So what's your experience with no code? How did you get to know it? And like,
Yeah. So
how'd you get into it even?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not a coder. And so when I went to start Career Jungle, I didn't really know what I needed to do. I thought maybe I'd need to start like get a development agency. And like I didn't even know what a landing page was or a server was. So I was really like coming at a left field. And when my first experience, and actually I spoke to Ben about this for trying to get a landing page made on Fiverr, went horribly. And essentially I couldn't communicate with the developers and they were just making it horrible and it looked bad. It didn't work well. Like things were flying all over the page. And then you remember, I actually showed it to you when it was ready and you were like,
it was one of the ugliest web pages I've ever seen.
Yeah. And it was completely hideous. And I started looking at, how can I make this myself, but without learning for years or months at code. And I stumbled upon, I started with Wix, and then I went on Product Hunt and I started looking at some things. And then I stumbled onto this platform called Bubble. And Bubble is like a no code tool. It's like the OG of no code, started in 2012. And they've essentially building like a no code tool to build like full on software products. So you can actually
Is it older than Wix?
I don't think it's older than Wix. So Wix and Squarespace were like the first, I guess you could call them the OGs, but they're not really, people don't really consider them no code. Like they're no code, but they're on the fringe because you can't do that much like customization with them. And they're very like static pages, even though that's changing a little bit with Squarespace, I know, and Wix is having some integrations, but for a while they were just like these static pages versus usually when we think about no code, it's things that like you can do interactions, you can interact with a database and that
Right.
type of stuff. And yeah, so Bubble was like the first one, and they're the most open one. So you can actually create like Twitter on Bubble,
Cool.
and that's like the extent of it. And if you actually go to notrealtwitter.com, you can see a Twitter clone built on Bubble. And I stumbled upon it, and since then I've been like hacking away some things for Career Jungle. And Bubble is, I would say, the hardest platform. I wouldn't recommend somebody starting out in no code go into it. That's how I started. And I started just building around and learning about it. And I found a little bit of the no code people on Twitter. And I tested out a few different tools too. And yeah, and now I then did a boot camp with AirDep, which is an agency that builds on top of Bubble.
So you
And I
practice
learned
what you preach. You also go to boot camps.
exactly. Yeah. And so I believe in boot camps, and it was amazing. And yeah, and I've been, hacking away at it and learning how to build complete software products. Like we built an Upwork clone in just 3 weeks after like having almost no experience with it. And that's really the power of it. And that's my story. And now I'm like obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with Bubble. So I'm not as involved in like the no code movement, but that's what I'm working on. I'm working on some things for Career Jungle and some other projects. And that is my personal story. But what's more important is why this matters in today's world. And so many people I know have so many ideas. And even though Career Jungle is my main project and the thing I care about the most, I have so many other ideas that I want to bring into this world. And I have an idea for an app for this, or like, I don't know, like whatever. There's got, anytime there's got to be an app for that, and you would just have no idea where to start. No code is like perfect because you can just like hack together something for that and test it out pretty quickly, especially if it's something really simple. Then you don't need to go through like a dev agency or things like that. And that's really why it matters in the world. And I am a big believer in it. And I've seen so many people make money or make real businesses just from no code that I think it's a shame most people still have no idea what I'm talking about. And they're like,
Are there any that we know? Are there any businesses that are primarily on no code?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that offhand. I don't think there are that many like international consumer businesses that were built on no code, but there's a lot of businesses that are like incredibly popular and they're like niche. So usually it's like very niche businesses, but they're really popular. I know on Bubble, there was one where it's like they do financing for your solar roof, and they just sold the company and they built it all on Bubble. There's another one I saw where he sells like homemade, mushrooms. I think he grows mushrooms, and he created this
Okay.
like store, and it's like fully customizable and like with shipping and everything. And that's very successful. And then most people would know like they probably know a lot of businesses that have websites on Wix, which is like the basic of no code, but they don't know how much they can do and how they can create like an iPhone app with Glide, or they can do so many other stuff with it.
Okay. So you were saying that you can build like full software on Bubble. And to me, that's interesting because when we were at IDC in university, we built a website with Wix. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, I can do a lot of basic design stuff. I can design the page, I can put a header, I can put a footer, I can put all these sections, I can link between the pages. And I think there was some SEO optimization. But when I think about it now, you can't really build anything interesting. You can't build anything with functionality. And maybe that's changed, and maybe it's just because I didn't use Wix that much. But you're saying that with Bubble, it's different.
Bubble is different. I'll break down in a minute, just like the main platforms. But yeah, you can't build a business on Wix, right? You can't, like, your business can't be a Wix site, even though I've heard there are people who have done it, but they put in like a form and their business is mainly just a form. So they're giving travel recommendations. They can do that with Wix, and they just have a form on the Wix site. But for most businesses, you can't create a business on Wix, like an internet business on Wix. And Bubble is like the other extent where it's really hard to use. You have to learn all the concepts of coding, but it's all in English, and you can build, it's built so you can build like a bit fully customizable business on Bubble. And the way Bubble works is essentially like on Wix, you can navigate pages, but in Bubble, for example, you can sign a user up and then charge their credit card, or you can have them navigate a page and then display all their purchases and then customize a recommendation for them. And you can really create like fully interactive web experiences and like literally as far as Twitter. And that's the extreme. Now, Bubble is really the extreme because it's the hardest to use. It's so open-ended that you can build whatever you want, but there are literally hundreds of tools that have came out, since then that offer something in the middle. So there's one called Glide, which I know is like what people have started shifting to as a starting point, because Glide is a lot easier to use. It works on templates and it really is mobile first. So it really lets you have an app on your phone and a Dalo too. And those are limited in what you can do, but they're a lot easier to use. And you don't need to worry as much about the design because they work a lot mostly with templates. And yeah, so that's the main like difference is like V1 of no code was Wix and Squarespace, where you can just like create sections and put like static things on a page and maybe navigate a page. And then the newest and most advanced thing is now like Bubble. That's the most advanced. I would say that's the most you can push no code before you start bumping into code.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the, if I'm a guy and I'm browsing Career Jungle, what would draw me to maybe doing that Bubble course, that boot camp that you did?
Yeah. One, there's a shortage of Bubble developers.
So what's a Bubble developer? 'Cause I've
A
never
Bubble
heard of it.
developer is someone who builds on Bubble. So Bubble is no code, and the whole idea is like democratizing software creation. But the truth is you need to learn all the concepts of code, how to structure a database, how to really design UX, all these things that go into websites. You need to know that, or you need to work with people who do that. And so essentially what happened is now there's Bubble developers. And there are people who just build on Bubble for other people. So like Bubble agencies, and then there's coaching, I know is a huge market. And then just developers, like people hire
Did you
Bubble
say
developers.
coaching?
Yeah, Bubble coaching.
Okay,
Because
what's a Bubble coach?
because it's so hard to build on Bubble, because you're starting from like a blank canvas. If you get stuck or you need a debug or things like that, people get stuck a lot on Bubble, and they'll hire somebody for an hour to just help them get through their issue.
Okay,
And that's huge.
interesting.
Like Bubble just opened up their own coaching marketplace, and there's so much demand, like it's crashing and it doesn't
So
really work well.
if you're writing some sort of software on Bubble and you get stuck because you can't Google it as much, you would go to a coach and he or she would help you solve it.
Yeah, essentially. Or you just may want to plan out your database and discuss it with someone. I'm not so familiar because I didn't do it, but I know like Bubble released their coaching platform and they're booked for like months ahead of time. But Bubble's very selective on who they chose, who can be a coach. But yeah, essentially you can do that. You can get unstuck. You can, plan whatever you want. There's so many things. You can talk about UX or UI. You can APIs is like a very hard thing in Bubble. So that's something that people, I'm sure, a lot talk about. That's a whole topic in its own. And the prices range from like 150 to 250 an hour. So it's a very lucrative job. And there's very few Bubble experts because it's such a new platform. And yeah, so you can become a Bubble coach, a Bubble developer. And so I just got an inquiry on LinkedIn for a Bubble developer job. And then you can become a freelancer, or you can start your own agency. There are so many people who started companies, they didn't work out, and they started agencies, and it's just growing like crazy because it's so open-ended and people are like, oh, and I want to go back. The reason it's so much better if you can just you can hire a code agency or a bubble agency, is that bubble agencies are going to be like 5x cheaper. It depends which agency. Some of them may be the same price, but they'll also be like 10x faster. So 5x cheaper, 10x faster, and easier to customize. And so that's why a lot of people are choosing like bubble or bubble agencies instead of code agencies or dev
Okay.
agencies. So yeah, that's that's just one platform. I'm just talking about bubble. It's still a very niche platform, still in its early days, but that's just one example of what's going on. And I just want to mention another platform, Webflow, which is way larger and way more used than Bubble, which is more of a design focused no code platform. And there you can do a little bit more than Wix, but really you could build like beautiful customizable websites. And they have really such a whole ecosystem of agencies. And a lot of companies, like tons of companies, large ones, even large startups, are moving their landing pages to Webflow because you can create these like beautiful websites, and they have also a massive ecosystem of agencies, way larger than Bubble, from what I know.
Okay.
And so that's one set of careers in like no code, and that's like in the web dev side. So that's like if you want to be in a no code in the web development area, it's really Webflow and Bubble are the largest, and there's like obviously hundreds and thousands more. But yeah, that's one area that's interesting.
Okay. So you basically, are they interchangeable? If you learn Bubble, are there things that they share between them, between Bubble and Webflow and all of them, or do you actually have to learn each platform?
So this is where it gets interesting. So if you learn, they're very different. So no, the simple answer is no. I don't know how to use Webflow, but I know how to use Bubble. It's like Bubble is more like a programming language. So it's like a programming language written in English, so to speak. That's how I would define it, because it's very complicated. You have to understand the nuances of how Bubble works, how the Bubble engine works, and design their whole design platform. It's really bad, to be honest, but it has like its own ways of how it works. And then Webflow, from what I understand, is like abstracting a lot of the like front end development. So it's actually like you're using the same concepts as HTML, but it's like you don't need to code them, so to speak. And so I think Webflow is more like a design platform. So I don't know what I would compare it to, but it's like it's mostly about really designing in colors and fonts and things like that. And they really focus on like beautifully like transitions and all these things. And Bubble is like a lot worse at that. And if you know how to design, I think it's like useful, but Webflow won't really help you as much in Bubble, and knowing Bubble won't really help you in learning Webflow.
Okay.
And
So what else could you do with Bubble? I mean, is it a tool, or I guess not just Bubble, but no code in general? Are there no code tools that can help you? For instance, if you don't want to become a no code developer, and maybe you're not a programming person, but you want to use some no code tools. So is there any benefit to that? If maybe you're in tech sales, or I don't know, you're in, I guess, design we already covered, all the different things that are adjacent to really being a developer. Is no
yeah,
code relevant there as well?
yeah. So it's really relevant for everyone. And this is like one of my main points here, is that everyone should be looking at no code tools that fit them. And there are so many. I don't know most of them. The main ones I would say that are relevant to anyone, I would say are Zapier. Okay, and Zapier essentially allows you to automate things that you would do manually. So you can
Okay.
connect like your Google Sheets. Let's say if you're a salesperson and you're using Salesforce, Google Sheets and Salesforce, or Google Sheets and Calendar. And it essentially allows you to automate anything without any code between platforms. So you can say like, when someone creates an event on my calendar, send me an email and save it to my Google Sheet and set a reminder, that type of thing. And you can create automations between different software tools, and it connects literally almost every single software or SAP internet-based software tool. It'll connect it. So Zapier that's also one of the most popular no-code tools, and that's in the automation space. And then Airtable is like a really good Excel replacement. It like really works a lot better. You can do a lot more with it, and it's on the internet. It has a bit of a learning curve, but I would say it's way better than Excel because you can display the data in all kinds of different ways. You can create it as a workflow management tool, and it's just an upgraded Excel. And then the last one I would say, and this is borderline a no-code tool, but Notion. We use Notion a bunch, and it's essentially a build it yourself. I would say it replaces all of Microsoft Office or a lot of like Word and PowerPoint and all those, except for Excel. So it has a little bit of the database functionality, but you can't really run like large documents. So anything that's like any Excel you use for like workflow management or for like internal use, that's not like holding large amounts of data, Notion is good. And you essentially build yourself your own tool. So you can have at the same page like a Trello board. You can have like text, you can have like a list, and it's like a really good replacement of like Word or even Google Docs, etc. So those are the main ones that I think would help you. But there are so many more. There's so many things for like really niche industries. And if you type in no code, like in Google or on Twitter, you can get to some of these websites where they have all the no code tools, and they'll like describe what each one is good for.
Okay, interesting. So
Yeah.
what else could you tell us about no code?
Yeah, so this is really where I think what's interesting about no code, and this is my thesis, speaking of careers, like why does this matter for my job? If you just graduated college, again, we always go back to that example, and you're
Right.
looking for a new job, and maybe you studied something that was interesting, but wasn't necessarily a career you want to do right now. No code is like an amazing place to go right now because you won't need to start from scratch, and there's a shortage of people. And so it's like less of a learning curve and more demand at the moment. I mean, obviously things could change. And so I want to go over 5 of the jobs I think are going to be like massive. We went over a little bit of them, but I'll just go over another area where I think the growth is insane. And that is like platform jobs. No code can be like building your startup and creating a website, or it can be like these platforms like Salesforce or HubSpot, which are like CRMs. And they may have a little bit of code. So there's this idea of low code where you add like a little bit of code, but you don't need to know that much. And so Salesforce, for example, has 900,000 careers available. They can't fill Salesforce jobs. And I don't know exactly what Salesforce people do, but it's just people who just work on Salesforce within companies. And that's 900,000 in North America they have available Salesforce jobs, and the salary is $80,000 to $112,000 for starting. And so these are really good jobs that are available, and there just aren't people who know how to do it. And so I know in one of the episodes we're trying to get somebody who knows Salesforce, but these jobs definitely exist. And of course, in every career, it'll take some time to really learn it, but it's really interesting. And definitely a great job without knowing how to code, but still being like a digital career. Another one is like HubSpot. There's a bunch of HubSpot, which is another CRM platform that has like lots of jobs for that. And they call it like HubSpot automation specialist type of thing. And really the idea is that the jobs, if you know a platform like Tableau, which is like a data visualization platform, or Power BI, or Salesforce, you can just become an expert in that platform and get a job just working on that platform in companies. And like Bubble is an example. The Bubble is more focused on startups, but those exist, and that's probably way larger than startups. It's like these enterprise jobs on a specific platform. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm learning Bubble and creating Career Jungle. But if I didn't know Bubble, maybe and I was just graduating and I know what I know now, I would maybe just go all in on Salesforce because there's so much like opportunity. And I'm not necessarily, I didn't really think I would be the best at coding per se. And so that's something to look at. And if you're just starting out, I would just pick a platform that you think is going to grow. And there are Notion experts too, and there's Airtable experts, and those are becoming jobs. And so I would pick a platform and become like a real expert in it. And then 100% you'll find them. I think from 90 to 100% you'll find employment within like a year. And
Wow.
that's
That's
like,
how come, why are you so confident about that? Why do you think it's so popular and the demand is so big?
because I see it. So I'm not trying to speak my own book, so to speak, and say, oh, I learned Bubble and therefore so much demand. It's because there is 900,000. That means there's millions of jobs out there for Salesforce, and they're struggling. They can't train. They can't get the universities to teach Salesforce. So there's just so much demand, and there's just not enough people that know this skill. And so when you look at these numbers, you're like, what's going on here? Like, why aren't people doing that? And the second thing is I'm pretty involved in the no code community, and I see these jobs starting to pop up, and companies are begging for people to do it because these are people that can automate and help them become a lot more efficient. So in Bubble, it takes coding and creating web development and makes it like 10x more efficient. And so obviously there's going to be a huge demand until it reaches the mainstream, and obviously too many people go into it, or it becomes ubiquitous, like you need to know Bubble, etc. But these people who know this stuff, like for example, I know Bubble, I can create a website literally a 10th of the time it'll take an agency. But also if you Salesforce, you can suddenly implement, a way more efficient Salesforce system. Or there's also like healthcare IT systems, or a lot of niche systems that are very popular and they have tons of jobs, but people just don't know them. And also with Notion, for example, you can build your own kind of workflow management tool instead of using something like Monday, which is like a CRM in Israel, which I thought was horrible. I used it once, no offense. I thought it was horrible, but you can just build your own on Airtable or Notion. And so if you can just have somebody in there building out your own CRM system or your own custom tool for yourself for not so expensive. I mean,
And so for us that don't know, if a business uses Monday as their CRM, do they pay a lot of money for it?
oh yeah, they're paying so much money. They're paying yeah, essentially they're paying a lot of, also Salesforce costs a lot of money, but it's more enterprise. But Monday, for example, it's not so flexible. It's like they claim they're flexible, but they're not so flexible. And you're just paying 3 or 5 times what you'd pay for Notion or Airtable, and you're getting,
Sounds if you have this system that is expensive and rigid, and instead you can have one of your employees building you a customizable system that can be as fluid, and you can tweak it as much as you want, and it's in-house.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's really the beauty. And you can integrate it with all your other systems without hiring anyone. Like you hire one person and he can essentially take that system and then integrate it with all the other systems. And that's really exactly what you're saying. That's really why it's going to grow so much in the next few years. And yeah, and that's the job I'm most like bullish on. That's the one I think that will grow the most, because if you look at job descriptions,
Is this Notion? Is this a Notion developer?
I don't think Notion specifically, but I think like Airtable, Zapier, and Notion, and more complicated systems. Like I think more jobs are going to be in the enterprise systems.
So you
and
think
more
there are
like
going to be more no coders, basically?
Yeah, I think there'll be more there already are. There are already so many people who use Wix and Squarespace compared to like coders. But I think there'll be more, everyone in the organization, whether you're a lawyer, an accountant, you'll be using no code in some way, and you'll have somebody there who can build out things with no code. And I'm more bullish on enterprise. So the softwares I don't know as much, which are like Salesforce, HubSpot, those are less no code tools, but they're platforms that have jobs. That HubSpot
Right.
is more no code. It's really no code is such a blanket statement, but I don't know if I can actually call Salesforce no code. But like Airtable, for example, that's a tool where if somebody knows that, you can 10x, like you can be so helpful in an organization, especially like, let's say you're in an accounting firm and you have somebody who knows Airtable, he can build out all the internal tools and the whole firm can use those tools and just refer back to them if they need customization. And they don't need to go to a development agency or hire a team of software developers to build out something that it's not as competent. Maybe they can have one software developer and one Airtable person, and that's
Right.
it.
I was speaking with a friend and I was actually looking for a Salesforce person. I'm not quite sure what the title is, say Salesforce developer, admin. But yeah, almost every person I reached out to told me that they have a guy who he every time they need something on Salesforce, they go to him. So I think we already are seeing that Salesforce, is huge. You can't I never learned to work with it during my degree, but I heard about it over and over again, like all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Salesforce is massive. Now, I wouldn't put that necessarily in the no code space, but it's just a good example that I think will spread more to no code tools. It's an example of just like you learn a platform and then you just have a job in that platform.
So
And yeah,
if we go back to the problem that we always talk about, which is you finish school and it's not enough to land your first job, it's a pretty good remedy because you're saying it's not. I hear what you're saying, that some of them are pretty complicated, but some of them are maybe uh or I should say even the ones that are more complicated, they seem like a good option. If you're just a person and if you read it in English, you can understand the coding concepts. Maybe learning a language isn't for you. But if you're saying you can get a job that doesn't require a degree that can pay you at least 80,000 within a year, you could find a job. And it's fantastic, especially
right.
if you did a degree and you just find out that the degree on its own, it's not getting your foot in the door.
Yeah,
But then,
yeah,
so when I said this, the thing that came into my head is, okay, so how do you go about learning one of these platforms? And I know you said Salesforce isn't exactly no code, but let's group it together because it is a platform. It's a platform that you learn, you get a job. So do you do courses? Do you do boot camps?
yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah, so each tool is different, but I would say like the largest Salesforce is like the top, like the $80,000 jobs is not anywhere near the platforms I'm using right now, but that's
Mhm.
like just I think like a good indicator of what will be. And Salesforce
Okay.
isn't necessarily no code, but for Salesforce specifically, Salesforce has a website called Trailhead, Salesforce Trailhead, and they'll teach you and you can walk through the modules on what Salesforce jobs you want, and they have communities and they have exams and they have certifications, and that's how I would go about Salesforce. And that's like a behemoth on its own. That's very extreme, but I would say for most no code tools, and Salesforce, we'll have a Salesforce person here to explain more what he would recommend, but for most no code tools, it's really about trying it and learning it on your own, and then getting involved with a community of people who are using it. If Notion, for example, if you become really good at Notion, what I would do is join the Reddit groups, join the Twitter Notion experts, follow them, understand the trends, learn from them, and maybe hire them as a coach for a couple of hours once every 2 weeks type of thing, and then really build out your expertise. Notion I think will be less. Again, no code is so broad. Notion, I think there'll be less like Notion jobs, but I think there'll be a lot of like Airtable, or people know how to use Airtable and Zapier because that's a little bit harder to learn. And they have all their materials on their website, so it takes some motivation. But what I would do is really get a friend and really go through the tools and find the ones where you see a lot of requests on their forum. Hey, I need help with this tool. Can I hire somebody? And they're not getting responses. And then
Mm.
really just quadruple down on that tool. And then eventually, if you see the demand, you'll be able to get hired at least as like a freelancer on that tool. And as you build your name around the tool, you can start charging a lot more. And so that's why I recommend for most tools. Some tools like Bubble, I went through a boot camp that was free. It was called AirDev like boot camp, and that was amazing. So some will have these type of things, and most of them will have also like Udemy courses available. Or if you go on Gumroad, which is like also another place where you can buy like either a PDF guide or a course about how to use one of these tools, and then really just start building things and try selling like templates and stuff like that as like a start, or just offering like free help for people, like free coaching. That's also useful. So just organize what I just said. Start with finding the tool that you want and you see there's demand. 2, play around with it. 3, buy a Udemy or whatever course. 4, get involved with the community. And 5, I would say, is like start offering help for free and helping people out on the forum.
Okay, there you have it.
That's the guide I would give. I'm not an expert, but that's what I'm seeing. The people that are succeeding a lot more are way ahead of me. That's what they're doing. They're on the forum every day answering questions. They have an agency. They're putting out content all day on like Bubble. And so that's the playbook.
Oh, I'm fading away into the wall. It seems, yeah, I think this is a very good note to end on. I'll give my perspective shortly as someone who knows how to code. What I liked about it is you told me you can get something right away. You can put something up in a few days. If you're a small business and you need a landing page, instead of hunting for someone, you just build one yourself. And I think that's true for Wix as well. Again, there's always learning curves for these, but if you can even hire someone now to do it, and they can give you the results fast, as opposed to story. A lot of people, what they do is they'd find some sort of developer overseas, and some people look down on it. I see no reason. And it's just such a general grouping. You have some great developers overseas, but how do you know? It's very hard. So I think your story is very common, where you find someone, the communication isn't great, the end product isn't great, it's all wonky, and then instead you can have this product that can just be built very fast, and you can get different iterations of it fast, because if they complete the product within a week instead of several weeks, you go, okay, I don't like this, fix it. You don't have to wait a couple of months, which isn't always true for software development. Sometimes you can raise, if you have a good team and they know what they're doing and they have good templates, and they can raise a website very fast. But I see the advantage to it. I'm really interested to see how it will play out.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry.
I think it's great, because again, the main thing that we try to find here is, okay, what do you do if you just got your degree and it's not enough? Or what do you do if you never got your degree and you don't have enough experience to go into something new? And you're going, okay, I don't want to learn for loops, and I don't want to learn variables about computer memory. It's not me. I can understand the concept in a conversation. I get it. That's not the problem. I'm not a coder. I have more. Yeah, I see the merit behind it. And again, for me, I don't know enough about it, and I think it's too soon. I'd love to keep an eye on it as it develops. I will say that Salesforce, as you point out, it's not exactly no code, but it's still in this realm of what we're talking about, where you learn a platform, you get a job. And I think there's some very solid advice there. You always have the risk when you specialize at something, that at a certain point it goes out of fashion, and then you have a niche that's not, you have the specialization, it's not used, and then you specialize. But I think that's true. I think that's always been true as a software developer, that you need to continue learning, and you're never done. And I think it's always true. It's also true for doctors, because even medical doctors go to conferences and they learn about new treatments, and surgeons learn about, I don't know if you know this show Scrubs, but there was like this one dog that was much older than the rest, and he was doing a surgery that was very outdated. And then the younger guy was telling me, we have this new surgery, it doesn't leave as much of a scar, there's less risk. So everyone has to continue learning. So as the no code creeps in, becomes integrated into just part of your job description, I think more jobs are going to have to keep up in learning new things. And again, I think that's fantastic for what we want. We want someone to, I made a mess of what I'm saying, but my point is that there are dangers of specialization and it's going out of style, but I think that's something that you can mitigate by learning more platforms. And I think that if we're just looking at the bird's eye view and we're saying, okay, how do I get from not being able to get my foot in the door to having a lucrative career? This is great because you can learn platforms in relatively short time, and you can learn several of them. And I think it's just fantastic. It's amazing. That's like the original dream with coding, where you can learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and a few frameworks on your own, and you get a six-figure job. Not always, okay, but you're doing better than what you did before. And I think that's just making it even easier and even more open. And I'm always for that.
Yeah, I have a few more comments on that. I think you're bringing up some good points, like specialization versus like more general knowledge. And I think, first of all, just because there's no code, it doesn't mean that there won't be a need for coding. And so if you're up for
Sure.
coding, there's going to be more and more demand. There's a shortage of good engineers, and that'll continue, I think, like even more and more. What really no code does is like it lets the engineers focus on and the coders focus on, and this is like commonly said in the no code space, like letting engineers focus on what like the complicated stuff and letting no coders to just build like the sign up page or like basic websites, whereas like Bubble can extend with code, in which case you really need a coder, and I can't do. And even for coders, if they want to move to no code just for like their website layout, and then they create an engine on the back end or a database on the back end, there's plenty of low code solutions for that. And really it helps complements developers. So it's not like in competition, but for like basic stuff, it's really good. And I think regarding like specialization versus generalization, like if you learn a new platform, it's going to be easier for you to learn another platform because suddenly you get the concepts. And it won't be that easy, and be careful, because if you're jumping into Bubble and thinking you'll learn it in 2 weeks, it's probably not going to happen unless you're already a UX UI person and you really understand coding concepts. But if you're new to this whole space, I'd say you really need to be careful of what you choose, and or I would even recommend like using an agency if you're trying to build software, because the agencies will work quicker because they already are working off of templates and like pre-existing stuff. And the last thing I'll say is like careers are shifting so much, and even if you don't work, so for example, knowing Airtable you may not work 100% on Airtable in the next 5 years, because maybe it'll take longer than I think. That'll be an incredibly useful skill for whatever job you want to do. And if you do like HubSpot's guide to SEO, or you learn HubSpot, that'll be useful for any company using HubSpot. And there are millions. And suddenly you can say, you'll stand out in the interview because you'll say, hey, I know HubSpot, I'm certified on this, or I'm certified on Zapier or Webflow, if you're going to a company that's using Webflow and you want to be a UX designer, so to speak. And so it's not just for like getting a full-on job in these platforms, even though I think that'll be huge, but these tools are like necessary can help you stand out so much in interviews. Cool. All right. Thank you guys for listening to me rant. I think that was a good episode. I can hear my point of view. and a little bit of what Ben thinks about the no code movement as our resident coder. And next time, hopefully we'll have somebody from Salesforce on air. Ben, any last words?
No, have fun with no code, have fun making something, because I think
Yeah,
at the end of the day, either one of them, it's really fun making something of your own and playing around for getting lost. And something that I noticed this week, I did a small tutorial, I was learning something and I just got lost in it. And I learned so much. And typically I have a very linear learning path where I go by, I try to learn all the features and just get lost in it, have fun, make something.
yeah, 100% for that. All right, till next time.